A German-born American artist, Josef Albers came to the Bauhaus in 1920, a year after it was opened. A student of Witten, he was quickly promoted to teacher in the Department of Design at the Bauhaus in 1923. His stature was such that he was promoted to master in 1925 when Gropius moved the Bauhaus to Dessau, Germany. One of the last faculty to leave the school when it closed in 1933, Albers had a huge impact on art and graphic design when he returned to the United States. First at Black Mountain College and later at Yale, Albers continued to explore the scientific analysis of color theory. It was at Yale that he published a seminal work on color theory called The Interaction of Color. In summarizing his own book, Albers said, "The book, Interaction of Color, is a record of an experimental way of studying color and of teaching color. In visual perception, color is almost never seen as it really is, as it physically is. This fact makes color the most relative medium in art. In order to use color effectively, it is necessary to recognize that color deceives continually. To this end, the beginning is not the study of color systems." Josef Albers was always known for a propensity to break out of the acceptable, champion the experimental, and dispute tradition. Not only did he lead in research, he was one of the leaders in the teaching of color theory as well. The major tenet of his work is that color does not exist by itself, but is judged by the interaction of colors when they create illusions side by side. Consequently, he created the series of color diagrams we have been seeing in order to teach how the human eye can be manipulated. The mantra of Albers with his students was that theory follows practice, because he always wanted them to first try something, play with color, and then come up with a theory of why that interaction happened the way it did. Josef Albers dramatically changed the landscape of art education, and color theory, and even advertising. He was able to take the ideas of Johann Itten and transmit them to America after the destruction of the Bauhaus. Thus, the ideas continued to live on. The improbable rise of Marcel Breuer from Hungarian peasant boy to world-famous architect would not have been possible had it not been for Walter Gropius. Born in 1902 in the village of Pécs near the southern border of Hungary, Breuer came of age in the aftermath of World War I and the collapse of the Austrian Empire. Poor but determined to succeed, Breuer worked hard in school and was rewarded with a scholarship to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Ironically, the same school Hitler had been denied acceptance to in 1908 and 1909. However, the young Hungarian became dissatisfied with the stuffy, fixed rules. One day, while working a temporary job, he broke a carpenter's plane that had been borrowed. Unable to pay for a new one, he fled Vienna to a new school in Germany he had just heard of, the Bauhaus. Once there, he was immediately recognized as an extraordinary designer. Initially, his chair designs were what made him famous. In fact, royalties from the factory production of his chairs gave him money to live on, even in the midst of the ruined German economy in the 1920s. However, Breuer wanted to be an architect. A patent battle over one of his chairs nudged him towards this destiny. While he had some experience working for Gropius during his time at the Bauhaus, Breuer knew that he needed to get out and work in an office setting. Therefore, he set out for Paris in 1924, working there until 1925. There he met Le Corbusier and began to articulate his own views on architecture away from the dominating influence of Gropius. After a brief time in Paris, he moved to Berlin and set up his own practice. When the Great Depression hit the already weak economy of Germany in 1929, it wiped out nearly all building activity. With nothing to do, and money still coming in from his chair royalties, he decided to go on a tour of Southern Europe and North Africa in 1931. A stop in Zurich led to his design for the influential Donautal apartments in partnership with Alfred and Emil Roth. Yet war was on the horizon. Due to his association with the Bauhaus, he was forced to leave Germany in 1935. Stopping over at England, he received an invitation from Gropius to come and teach with him at Yale in the United States. It was during this time that his own theory of architecture began to emerge. A personal friend of Breuer, I.M. Pace, said that he embraced the credo of the machine civilization, the potential of industrial technology. The work of Breuer's mature years illustrates the Cubist sensibility of this sculptor-architect. While Gropius was known for designing endlessly and rushing the construction drawings at the end of a project, Breuer was an intuitive designer. Breuer would quickly come up with a design concept and would spend the time allowed detailing everything. For this and other reasons, Breuer parted ways with Gropius and set up his own office in 1946. Breuer would go on to design many iconic works on his own, but it was not until he landed the big UNESCO World Headquarters in France that his career really took off. In a fascinating sequence of events, Breuer's office was very slow in 1952, so he decided to close down and go on a short vacation to Europe. There's a particular bar there called the Deux Mongeons in Paris that Breuer had always went to for good luck. On this particular day in 1952, the Architect Selection Committee for the UNESCO World Headquarters, Gropius, Le Corbusier, Sylvain Marcus, and Euro Sarnen, happened to choose this bar to discuss what they should do and who they should select to be architect. At that very moment, Breuer happened to be walking up, and Gropius told the committee that they should select him. The rest, they say, is history. Breuer received commission after commission until his peak in the 1970s. Iconic works such as St. John's Abbey in Minnesota, Ibiem Le Gaulle in France, Saint Francois de Sales, and Hotel Le Feng, just to name a few. Marcel Breuer represents the ideal that Walter Gropius had in mind when he set out to create the Bauhaus in 1919. A complete master, capable of designing both in the macro and the micro scale.
The beginning of understanding Mies van der Rohe is found in the beginnings of Mies van der Rohe in his family's stone-cutting shop as a young boy. Born to a line of stonemasons, Mies once recalled when his brother Ewald argued with his father over the value of putting much effort into an ornament that was going up high in a building. His father would have no part of it. "You're none of you stonemasons anymore," he would say. "You know the finial at the top of the spire of the Cathedral at Cologne? Well, you can't crawl up there and get a good look at it, but it's carved as if you could. It was made for God." For the rest of his life, and to the distress of his clients and their budgets, Mies built for God. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Mies had no formal education beyond the age of 15 in 1901. After working as a draftsman in various offices for nearly a decade, including the aforementioned office of Peter Behrens, Mies produced in 1912 perhaps the most recognizable project of his early career, the Kroller-Müller House, which was evidently a modernized version of Schinkel's Italiante Manor. His early career was marked by designs which closely followed the logic of Schinkel's, and while his aesthetic would decidedly change, his respect for classical reasoning and logic would not. Mies submitted his Kroller-Müller Villa project to Berlin's first architectural exhibition after the war, the Exhibition of Unknown Architects, put on by Gropius in the midst of his formation of Bauhaus. He was promptly rejected. Gropius said, "We can't exhibit it. We are looking for something entirely different." This was the scene of the avant-garde in which Mies found himself, a forward-thinking and progressive community of artists. Technological materiality, expressionism, neoplasticism, and supremacism became Mies's new influences. However, in his first built work of 1925, he returns to his roots with the project Brick Country House. After all, Mies was fond of saying, "Architecture begins when two bricks are carefully put together." Yet this house was certainly not conventional, with an orthogonal axiality and asymmetrical nature similar to that of the De Stijl. His theoretical projects of the time used more technologically advanced materiality and were tectonically distinct. In regard to the concrete office building, first published in 1923 in the inaugural issue of the avant-garde magazine G, Mies stated, "The materials? Concrete, steel, and glass. Reinforced concrete structures are skeletons by nature. No gingerbread, no fortress. Columns and girders eliminate bearing walls. This is skin and bones construction." This dematerialization of the walls through the use of plate glass would only grow in its expression and through the creation of the avant-gardist spatial paradigm in Mies's work. Speaking of glass, Mies noted that it permits us a degree of freedom in the creation of space that we will no longer deny ourselves. Mies certainly did not deny himself in the creation of the Barcelona Pavilion in 1929, an ostentatious confluence of planes, glass, and space meant to stretch to an infinite continuum. These planes generally mask the majority of tectonic elements, leaving the steel cruciform columns conspicuously singular. Are these columns a mere arbitrary element, or are they a microcosm of Mies's architectural theory? First, the cruciform column support is made up of planes itself, fitting the language found throughout. They are thin and plated in chromium, displaying the strength and beauty of the technology of steel. Yet the reflections of the columns of itself upon its surface creates a visual reminder of fluting. Furthermore, these columns are arranged in peristyle, referencing a classical ordering system. This duality was indicative of Mies's need to celebrate technology while nodding to classicism. 1 year later, Mies took over as director of the then faltering Bauhaus in place of Hannes Meyer, through appointment of the mayor of Dessau in 1930, until the Bauhaus was closed under pressure of Nazi Germany in 1933. The reasons are debated and ambiguous, but Mies eventually emigrated to the U.S. in 1937. Years later, in 1953, at a dinner held in honor of Gropius at the Blackstone Hotel in Chicago, Mies rose and stated, "The Bauhaus was not an institution with a clear program. It was an idea, and Gropius formulated this idea with great precision. As I said before, it was an idea. The fact that it was an idea, I think, is the cause of this enormous influence the Bauhaus had on every progressive school around the globe. You cannot do that with organization. You cannot do that with propaganda. Only an idea spreads so far."